I apologize. I've gotten so used to using my little portable spy camera that I've forgotten about the microphone when all I'm doing is making an audio recording here at my computer. I've got the microphone on my webcam here that I can use because apparently quite clearly the audio quality is much better on this than on my portable spy camera. I'm sorry, I forgot about that. I wish last night when I recorded the smoking gun video that I had thought of it. But hey, it was the middle of the night, and I'm not thinking about these things too clearly. So another topic that comes to my mind: how we're all supposed to be worried that everybody, all of us, have attention deficit disorder. We all have ADHD. Now remember, attention deficit disorder, the acronym is ADD. And what exactly ADHD is supposed to be more, you're supposed to be more credible if you talk about ADHD. For whatever reason. I don't remember what ADHD is supposed to stand for, and I don't really give a fuck. It's all the same bullshit. We're supposed to believe that all of us are somehow in such a hurry and being so genetically affected by all the pollution in our environment or in our foods or some shit like that our brains are no longer capable of paying attention, of focusing without the assistance of pharmaceutical drugs. That's what it comes down to. And they want to ingrain that in us from the very moment, if not sooner, that our children at the age of 4 or 5 enter kindergarten. They want to diagnose them as having a mental disorder for which there needs to be prescribed a fucking medication that will be dispensed by the school nurses from fucking kindergarten, because the kid runs around screaming and doesn't learn anything, doesn't listen, doesn't focus, doesn't pay attention. We're supposed to say, oh, well, this is a medical condition. It's not that the kid is a fucking idiot. It's not that maybe the kid's on a fucking unhealthy diet that's loaded full of 10 times as much sugar as the kid's body actually physically requires. No, we're not going to worry about that. We're not going to worry about all the magical sugar pops, toasty marshmallow colored cereals that we shove in their faces and say, "Okay, kids, buy this and you'll be able to fly and have magical powers and travel through time and pull rabbits out of hats," or whatever else we're supposed to expect kids. The commercials are supposed to make the kids think they're going to get magical benefits from eating this fucking sugar-packed cereal. No, don't think about that. Just recognize that we live in a modern age where boogeymen affect us, are now hiding around every corner, and there's Illuminati, and there's Freemasons, and there's Scientologists, and all the rest of it, who are doing this. And fluoride in the water is making us crazy and unable to focus on anything and pay attention and listen to when anybody talks. That's what we're supposed to believe. And so the answer will be prescription medication from the very earliest ages, from the time they enter kindergarten, if not earlier. And yet, in spite of all this insistence that people have medical reasons for not paying attention, for not listening, now the fan just went on, and the computer's now making this noise when the fan goes on. Only when the fan goes on, so far. But it's making me extra nervous because of the message I've been getting for 6 months about the disc the surface scan failure, a scratch on the disc, one of the discs. The maintenance, scheduled maintenance, monthly maintenance, or weekly maintenance on the computer that runs scans, it shows 2 discs, and it always shows one is failing the scan. And that's, I believe, why I got these. Oh, here it is. Oh, no, you can't see it. I'm not showing it to you. There's these 2 lights on the front of my computer. One of them is blue, and the other one's a flashing orange. And I believe they're both supposed to be blue. So the flashing orange, I believe, is responsible for this grinding noise that's going on now. And I'm supposed to reformat the computer, is what I looked it up. I'm supposed to reformat so that I store all my information, and then do a cleansing of the computer. Is supposed to fix the surface scratch problem. But just what it takes to go through that is probably much more simple than it seems to me at first. But it seems like a daunting task, and I haven't done it. And I'm starting to feel I'm going to have to better buy a new computer. If I'm not going to get right to it, I better. Now, since this just started yesterday, if I'm not going to get right to it, rather than risk that at any moment or in any day in the near future, this grinding noise might lead to a shutdown of the computer, I should probably just order a new computer, even if it's only, a $200 computer. I'm sure I could do that. So I have a backup when it finally crashes, and then maybe switch to the new computer and hand over the job of retrieving my information and doing that system purge on this computer, maybe to somebody else. I don't know. Anyhow, back to the topic of attention deficit. You see, do I have attention deficit because I got distracted by the noise on my computer, or is this actually good because you have attention deficit and you couldn't listen to me going on this same topic for more than 3 minutes at a time? Anyhow, we're supposed to believe that we've all got this medically validated diagnosis of attention deficit, the solution for which is that we need to have medically devised artificial chemicals to inject into our bodies to supposedly correct the situation. And your kids are running around screaming and not listening, not paying attention. We're supposed to think it's not their fault. It's not because, and I was talking about the cereal with all the sugar. It's not because of the diet. We're not supposed to consider that possibility. We're not supposed to consider the possibility that maybe they're just fucking bored out of their fucking minds, and that all the stuff that we're giving that's supposed to stimulate their minds, supposed to capture their imagination. I can't get no. Some useless information supposed to catch my imagination. I can't get no satisfaction. Maybe the possibility that kids simply aren't getting any satisfaction from all the useless information that we shove at them that's supposed to capture their imagination. Maybe they're running around screaming and not able to pay attention to what you're saying because they simply can't get no satisfaction from the bullshit way that we are raising them, and the bullshit world that we're raising them in, and all the bullshit entertainment that we're giving them that's supposed to keep them occupied. So we're supposed to think that we all have attention deficit, and yet at the same time, take a look at all the people talking about how they have attention deficit, and look at, this is what got me thinking about this, the O.J. Simpson trial. This didn't capture my imagination. I didn't get no satisfaction from obsessing over O.J. Simpson and whether he was guilty and why, or he was or wasn't guilty. And yet, millions upon millions, a significant percentage of us, if not a majority, were expected to be completely absorbed and fascinated to follow the detailed proceedings of the O.J. Simpson trial, and to follow daily, to gossip daily with each other about the how much sense or nonsense it did or didn't make. All the testimony and the evidence and the responses from O.J. Simpson or his lawyers to all the questions, and people were laughing and snickering and saying, oh, of course he's guilty. Of course he's guilty. Don't you notice how he said this and how he did that and how it doesn't match with this and that? And what about him putting on the glove and blah, blah, blah. So we are supposed to... You don't hear anybody saying, oh, well, I couldn't pay any attention to that fucking O.J. Simpson bullshit because I have attention deficit. I mean, I haven't heard anybody ever say that they didn't follow the O.J. Simpson trial because they're not capable of paying attention and focusing their mind on a thing when they want to do so. All the people that are claiming that they have attention deficit or that their little kiddies have to be medicated every day because their little kiddies suffer, are victims of ADHD, attention deficit disorder. The poor, oh, the poor children. Think of the poor children. Please give them more medications right now. Don't deny them their medications, because after all, they're victims of ADHD. I've never heard a single one of those parents or officials, school officials, insisting that kids, or medical officials, insisting that kids have to have medication for attention deficit because it's running rampant these days. I've never heard a single person suggest that anybody in this society should be expected to fail to follow intimately the details of the O.J. Simpson trial because they have attention deficit disorder. I've never, ever. And the same people look in two other areas of this nature. When you look at the average person in society and what they're supposed to be interested in, or two or three, look at how you have attention deficit. Wait a second, you have attention deficit and you can't focus on anything, but you spend 16 hours a day playing the same video game, doggedly pursuing a certain sort of a goal and reward in that video game, 16 hours a day, 362 days a year. 362 days a year, with the possible exception of maybe Christmas or maybe a day in which you're hospitalized for exhaustion from spending all the rest of your days playing video games 16, 20 hours a day. And you're trying to tell me you have attention deficit and you're medically incapable of paying attention to anything for more than 10 seconds? Video games, that's one aspect, and two other similar parallels are the attention to detail and to trivia that we are supposed to all in the society be capable of devoting to sports. People saying, oh, they have attention deficit disorder, or they can't focus their minds anymore because they're too old, or their children have attention deficit disorder, and yet they constantly grill their children and quiz their children every day about who won such and such a pennant, at how many RBA and how many extra yards they won the touchdown in 1953, and what was the date in 1953, and who was the quarterback or who was the pitcher and who was on second base. And I don't know who's on third, and that's what I'm trying to say. I don't know who's on third. No, he's on first. Who's on second? That's what I'm trying to ask you. I don't know. No, he's shortstop. We're supposed to be so obsessed that we can rattle off these statistics, these trivial statistics going back 50, 60, some people rattle off baseball statistics going back 90 or 100 years, and they can rattle them off no problem. They can tell you the day of the week, they can tell you the height and the color of the hair and the hometown that this person was born in, and all of the baseball teams that they played in, and what the years that they played on those teams, and what the reasons were for them quitting or getting fired from such and such a team, and when they died and what they died of. But we have attention deficit disorder because we can't pay attention to details. Bullshit. Bullshit. We have attention deficit disorder. The problem with attention, the problem with being able to pay attention is, as Mick Jagger indicated in Satisfaction, that certain things when things fail to capture our imagination, we are not going to be able to pay attention or want to pay attention. You have to want to pay attention to be able to pay attention. That's what it boils down to. If you don't want to pay attention, you're not going to pay attention. If you're not interested in the subject, your mind is going to wander. You're not going to be able to pay attention. You're either going to drift off to sleep, or you're going to daydream, or you're going to pull out some handheld video device and be going at that thing. It has to do with what captures your imagination. And for the average person, sports is supposed to capture our imagination. Oh, and the other one I didn't get to at equivalent parallel to sports is trivia about celebrities, particularly pop music celebrities. All the trivia we're supposed to know about what song was recorded and what year, and who the backup vocals were, and who was playing bass on it, and what studio it was recorded in, and when it was released, and how high it got in the charts, and who the main singer was married to or dating at the time, and blah blah blah. We're supposed to be endlessly fascinated. You never hear people saying, "Oh well, I can't pay attention. I can't keep track of all these pop musicians and their careers and the songs that they've put out, and the albums that they've put out, and the tour dates of such and such. I can't pay attention to that bullshit because I've got attention deficit, and my disorder in my mind is incapable of paying attention." You never hear people say that. Never, ever, ever. But when you ask them to pay attention to what was taking place at the World Trade Center attacks, then they say, "Oh well, I can't pay attention to details. After all, I have attention deficit disorder." You don't pay attention to what you don't want to pay attention to. You don't pay attention to what you don't take any personal interest in caring or knowing what the actual truth is. Then your mind wanders and you go playing your Rubik's Cube or your handheld video games. Or you run around screaming and looking for some drugs looking for some other drugs. You put your kids on Ritalin from the time they enter kindergarten, from the time they're 5 years old, or even 4.5 years old. You hook your kids on this Ritalin, and you tell them, if you don't take your daily medication, you're a bad child, you're disobedient. Don't you realize that to be a good child and to be a good person, you have to strictly follow a system of personal addiction where you cannot go a day without your drugs? And then, when they go and they seek out other types of drugs, you say, "Ooh, we need to enroll you in the DARE program to tell you to dare to avoid," let's see, what is DARE supposed to stand for? DARE. Drug awareness resistance education. Drug awareness resistance education. But if a child shows any resistance to taking the drugs that the school nurse and that the school principal and that their family doctor and that their parents say, "You must take this drug each and every day," if a child shows any resistance to that kind of drug use, then you say, "Oh, bad child, bad, bad, bad. We're going to have to strap you down in a straitjacket and force you, even if we have to inject it intravenously into you, we're going to inject these daily drugs into you if you don't voluntarily agree to go along with this daily drug addiction." What a fucking farce. What a fucking bullshit farce this whole attention deficit bullshit is, from beginning to end. People will not pay attention if they don't have the motivation to pay attention by taking an interest in the subject, and that's all it comes down to. And when we talk about kids in school being in practically every public elementary school in this country, being forced required to take daily medication for attention deficit because it might be too much of a burden on their parents, on their teachers, to try to keep them focused on classroom materials, classroom topics. The kids' minds are going to wander because it's boring bullshit. And the kids are going to run around screaming, plus they're stuffing their faces full of all this sugary diet, making them run around screaming, making them hyper, unable to pay attention because of all the sugary bullshit and they're coming to school with their little lunch boxes jam-packed with all these sugary snacks for them to keep shoving in their face every hour at school, or at least 3 or 4 times every time you have a break between classes. Each day, these kids are going to be shoving these sugary snacks in their own faces, and then the teachers wonder why they come back to the next class and they're running around screaming. And they can't pay attention. And the solution is supposed to be, well, give them their medications, give them a double dose today of their medications because they're running around screaming. Well, how about simply removing the other chemical influence that's causing them to run around screaming, the extra sugars that they're eating in these fucking snacks that their mother packs for them each day. No, you don't consider that. You don't consider having to affect those choices. The kids are running around screaming. Don't look into their lunchbox. Just inject them with some more pharmaceuticals. And then you have the fucking nerve to tell them, just say no to drugs. And you have the nerve to say, well, anyhow, the question is, the teachers, the teachers don't want to face it. Maybe the classes, the classroom materials that they're using and the topics that their teachers are droning on about, expecting the kids to pay attention to, are just completely useless information that is not going to pry their imagination. That was the word that Mick Jagger used, pry. To pry my imagination. That these classroom topics are not prying the imaginations of children. And so their imaginations remain shut tight like a clamshell, because nothing's prying them open. So nothing's succeeding in prying them open. But the notion that clamshells are shut tight because that's the way clamshells are and they all have to be pried open, ignores the fact of what a clam is. A clam is not something that its shell is shut permanently tight because there's a chemical imbalance. The shell is shut tight because the clam deliberately, intentionally shuts it when it senses that there's danger about, when it senses that there's some invasive organism trying to get inside. That's when this clam will clamp down tight, and make sure that doesn't happen. And when conditions seem relatively safe to the clam, then it will cautiously open itself up and then relax and allow its shell to open until it senses danger again. Well, this is the same thing this is the same way the human mind operates, especially a child's mind. If it senses invasive bullshit going on, it's likely to clamp down and shut tight and not be pried open. You keep trying to pry it open. So what we do is we prescribe chemicals to go into the bloodstream of children in order to chemically pry open their minds, when mechanically we're incapable of prying it open, because all the tools we're using to supposedly pry open their imaginations are bogus bullshit that there's no reason for the kids to take any interest in. So their minds remain clamped shut, and then they say, they have attention deficit, they're not capable chemically, physically, of focusing on anything more than 10 seconds. No, it's that there's a approximately 10-second threshold in which they will in which they will give the benefit of a doubt, try to give an open hearing to what it is you're providing to them. And if you don't catch their attention in the first 10 minutes, seconds, in the first 10 seconds, you don't catch their attention with what you're trying to lure them in with, they're going to clamp down, shut tight. Their minds are going to clamp down and shut tight and not pay any more attention to your bullshit if they're going to make a pretty immediate assessment of what you're offering to them. So you have to catch their imagination from the beginning by somehow having either relevance or excitement to what you're offering to them. Otherwise, they're not going to pay attention. So that's my rant about attention deficit. Well, I think it's all bullshit, and I think it's demonstrated amply by people's constantly demonstrated abilities to pay inordinate amounts of attention to inordinate amounts of trivia, if that sort of trivia is the sort of trivia designed to appeal to the average, typical, even mundane type of mind. Even if people have, we would consider mundane intelligence, they seem to be capable of applying extraordinary amounts of intelligence to those topics that they have come to convince themselves of, convince their own minds of, that it's worth paying attention to. In a similar way, that these idiot-savants, who are considered idiots, as the name implies, considered incapable of often conducting simple logic calculations or deductions, or even performing simple tasks like buttoning their own shirt, tying their own shoes. Simple tasks can be too difficult for them, but they can drone on and on and on about all this incredible trivia about what was the temperature on any day of any year, what was the temperature at what time, and what was the weather like, and when did it start raining, and how heavy was that rain on February 26th of 1927. And what day of the week what was, and everything, and who was the president at that time, and how many days left did the president have to his term. They can rattle all this shit off. So you say that they're idiots, but wait a second, look at all this computing power that they have in their minds directed towards useless information. And I contend to you, my suggestion is that most of the people that you're claiming they have attention deficit have every bit as much computing power as anybody else. Or anybody with that you wouldn't even say they necessarily have attention deficit, but you just say that they have a mundane mind and they don't have a lot of analyzing capability. You try to ask them to analyze and to ponder certain rational problems and rationalize and try to sort out through rational thought and deduction what the reality of the situation is. And they'll say, oh well, I don't have that, I'm not that smart. I'm just not that smart, I'm just an ordinary dumb schmuck, I'm not that smart. You can't expect me to be able to respond to these sort of things in any kind of focused manner. They're not that smart, but they can focus extraordinary amounts of mental gigabytes of or mental RAM of mental memory, random access memory. And that's exactly what the average person does, have random access, random memories of random details that they're able to clamp down tight on and memorize all these incredible details of trivia of things that are essentially random, like who gives a fuck who won the pennant in 1937 and who they beat and who beat them next year and then pennant, blah blah blah. But the average mundane mentality person has seems to on average, have every bit as much computing power, if not more ability to focus on detail than I ever could. I don't have that ability to focus on detail, but I don't have attention deficit. I don't run around screaming my fucking head off, and I don't go around cramming my face full of all these sugary snack materials, and I don't take drugs of any sort except aspirin. Except aspirin when I got a headache. And I'll tell you, I've hardly had a headache in the last month or the last 3 weeks anyhow since I've moved to my new place. And a lot of my headache, I'm sure, had to do with simply the environmental conditions of the heat on that third floor Garrett studio apartment. Where the heat was just incredible. And no wonder I had to take a lot of aspirin there and had a headache, on top of all the other things. Noises going on, jackhammers going on the street, cucaracha music playing from downstairs, people with their engines rumbling out in the parking lot, which I don't have to endure here. Except on rare occasions, there's either lawnmowers going for half an hour, and occasional motorcycle driving by. But in general, it's absolutely quiet here. And I haven't had a headache. And on top of all that, the fact that in Woburn, up on that Garrett apartment, I would stay in bed for weeks at a time. Not leave the apartment for weeks at a time. Not getting exercise. And here I'm getting daily physical exercise. And I'm not having headaches. Not needing to take the aspirin. Something easy to forget once you find yourself in a new situation, to completely forget. Oh yeah, I completely forgot how many days I had to take 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 aspirins even, because I'd wake up from my random sleeping patterns. And my sleeping patterns here are still fairly random, but I wake up and I get out and I go for a walk or I go for a bicycle ride, and I burn off calories and energy and keep my body physically active. I don't have the headaches. Enough for this. So there we go. Thank you for paying attention and focusing for the last 20 or 30 minutes of me talking on this subject. And if you've reached this far and paid attention, you've probably just demonstrated at least some principle of what I was discussing. That you are in fact capable of paying attention and probably don't need pharmaceutical chemicals, medications to help you do so. Oh my gosh, it's 33 minutes. Good night. Good night. And Larry.